Namaste and welcome to Get Set Green Season 3, the podcast where purpose meets planet. And I'm your host Pooja Avi, and today we are discussing a topic which affects every one of us, water. So, joining us today is Vishwanath, and yes, who is fondly known as the Zen Rain Man, a civil engineer, urban planner, and also founder of Rainwater Club, along with the director role in Biome Environmental Solutions, and he has spent decades understanding and helping communities, governments, and citizens to rethink how we harvest, manage, and value our water. So, welcome, Vishwanath.
Good evening and welcome. Thanks, Pooja, for having me here.
Thank you so much. Pleasure is all ours, and I'm personally quite excited for this episode because I also want to understand the landscape, the underground water aspect of Bengaluru, and what are all the causes. Let's say in terms of the flooding, all those things, and let's say I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So my first question would be to understand, Bengaluru's water reality when it comes to the water shortage or disappearing of lakes, which were like quite abundant and also a pretty high number when compared to the last 20-30 years now. So how can we understand this about, when it comes to the water management for Bangalore?
Yeah, so let's get to the basics, Pooja. First thing is that Bangalore has three taps for its water requirement. Right? The three
Hmm.
taps are the Kaveri River, which we use, and we are now currently getting between 1,900 to 2,000 million liters per day. This is
Hmm.
pumped from a place called Torekad in Hurley, which is in Kanakpura, and it's
Hmm.
about roughly 95 kilometers from the city, from where the water comes to the city. The second tap is rainwater. Rain falls on our city. We can harvest it, we can collect it, or we can use it to make up water in the soil, or we can recharge the groundwater, or we can store it in our lakes. That's the second tap. The third
Okay.
tap is treated wastewater, water that we consume in our homes, from the bath, from the kitchen, from the sink. It all goes and in the sewage network, and it gets collected in sewage treatment plants, a substantial portion of it, and there it gets treated. And this treated used water can also be used essentially for non-potable purpose, for all other purposes, right? So three taps for Bangalore, and four stores. Now, these three
Hmm.
taps bring the water, then it's stored. Where is it stored? Well, we store it in the dams and reservoirs in the Kaveri, and in some tanks and ground level reservoirs and overhead tanks in the city, human made storage structures. Second store is soil moisture. Soil is a good store, so you store water there. This is used by plants, trees, and bushes and shrubs to grow. That's the green component of Bangalore. The third is, of course, our surface water bodies, our keres, our lakes and tanks, wetlands, ponds, which can store water. And the fourth is aquifer, which is the groundwater. This has two components, shallow and deep groundwater. So the aquifer is on the fourth store. So what Bangalore has
Hmm.
to do is to learn to manage with these three taps and four stores for a growing population and a growing economy. And that's the overall position of Bangalore.
Okay. And civil engineer in me is quite interested to understand this water recycling and rainwater harvesting part. Could we spend some time on understanding, let's say, if somebody is interested in carrying out and building a system for their particular individual house, how can they go about it?
Yeah, so let's understand rainwater harvesting in two components. One is the natural component of rain falling on the soil, getting stored in the soil, getting stored in the lakes and ponds. That's and recharging the aquifer. So that's
Hmm.
one component of rainwater harvesting, which is a natural water harvesting, rainwater harvesting.
Correct.
The second is the human intervention, where we can pick up rainwater from the rooftop. The rooftop is one of the easiest to pick rainwater from,
Mm-hmm.
and if you keep the rooftop clean, which is free from any accumulated debris and dust and stores, then we can collect the water and filter it. So there are ready-made filters available in the market. We filter the rainwater, then we can store it in our sump tanks, or we can recharge it into the aquifer, put it into what are called recharge wells, and push it into the aquifer. So when you
Mm-hmm.
store it in a sump tank, then you can use it directly. When you store it in the aquifer, you use it as groundwater, as borewell water.
Yeah, and thanks to that, when given the rainfall and also the, let's say, the amount of water storage, can we have a rough estimate like how much is the quantity of percentage water coming from, let's say, the rainwater recharging and water treatment to
Yeah.
our Bengaluru water supply?
So let me give the numbers. Like I told you, we're getting about 2,000 million liters per day from the Kaveri. We will
Correct.
eventually get about 2,250 million liters from the Kaveri, right?
Okay. Okay.
After the completion of the fifth phase. Now, if you
Hmm.
turn to rainwater, the
Hmm.
average rainfall in the city over the last 10 years has been 1,000 millimeters. If
Hmm.
you translate that into volume terms and per day terms, the equivalent is 3,000 million liters per day. Kaveri, 2,250 million liters per day, but rainwater is 3,000 million liters per day. We're getting more rain falling on the city than what we draw from the Kaveri. How much can a house harvest? Just 1,000 square feet roof area house can harvest up to 1 lakh liters in a year.
Oh, this number is quite, let's say, promising because 1,000 square feet of an house, if we can manage to save 1 lakh liters in one particular household, we can more or less manage in whenever we have shortage or there is deficient scarcity of the supply from the, let's say, water supply unit. So this brings to me next question. The amount of water the soil can hold is dependent on the exposure to the soil level, right? Now that we have a lot of, let's say, the buildings and also other concretized, or let's say the roads which consume the majority of the landscapes, how will this affect going forward the amount of absorption of rainwater into the soil?
So it will become dramatically less. So two things are happening with rain. One is because of the global warming, urban heat island effect, we are getting more intense rainfall in a shorter duration. So the volume of rainfall has actually been increasing, but also it's been decreasing in terms of its duration. So therefore, it's heavily intense. Yeah. And the
Okay.
second component, as you pointed out, is that we are concretizing the surface. Yeah. We're just making sure that no rainwater can seep in. This
Mm-hmm.
means the runoff increases. What used to be about 15% to 20% runoff is now 90 to 100% runoff. Therefore, you see the phenomenon of urban flooding. So, therefore,
Yeah.
what do we do? Well, what we have to do is to mimic the old hydrological cycle, and we have to make sure that we become responsible as the bylaw for Bangalore states for 60 millimeter of rainfall. What does the
Mm-hmm.
bylaw of Bangalore says? That every rainfall of 60 millimeters falling on your rooftop, you should either create a storage or recharge, right? So
Okay.
the recharge
Okay.
structure is a simple structure of a 3 feet diameter well, which
Mm-hmm.
goes up to 10 to 20 feet deep, 10 feet to
Hmm.
20 feet deep. If
Okay.
every house is able to put in place a recharge well, and every gated
Hmm.
community, every apartment puts it in place, then we
Mm-hmm.
will replace the loss of our soil cover. We will replace it with the
Okay.
recharge well.
And this, I am quite, let's say, hopeful about this idea because given the less amount of soil available right now, and also there is one more threat which is for groundwater, right, where the aquifer recharge can be, let's say, drastically deteriorating. So one advantage with this well is like you will have the intake and the water can be, at least if there is seepage into the soil, it will help enhance the soil capacity of water bearing capacity. Now I'm also quite interested in asking one more question related to the biome environmental solutions, right? Where they had this mission of building 1 million wells for Bengaluru. Can you please elaborate more on that?
So it's a Biome Environmental Trust which is running this project. What we did is we came across the traditional well digging community called the Manuvadas. They have been
Okay.
digging wells in Bangalore for hundreds of years. They know
Okay.
the lay of the land. They know where the old wells are. They know where the water is sweet, where the water is saline. And they also now know how to dig recharge wells, which will put rainwater back into the ground. So we wanted to give these well diggers a livelihood. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore we have been working with them. It's not the trust project, it's like a movement where these
Hmm.
well diggers now have the skills to go and dig these recharge wells. So the million wells was an idea because there are more than a million plots in Bangalore, and the idea is that if every plot contributes to water conservation through the million wells, then not only will the well diggers have a livelihood, but Bangalore can get better water security. That's the goal.
Yeah. And I must say, I'm quite happy with the mission because it all starts with movements like this, where the awareness, of course, is created when you have such campaigns and missions going on. And the second part is it helps bring out the solution part to the problems. Unless we have a solution, talking about a problem doesn't make any sense. At least that's what I feel. And with you have like decade, let's say 2 3 decades of experience, totally 30 years of experience in this
40
industry.
years, Pooja, 40
Oh,
years.
sorry, let me correct, which is 40 years.
Yeah.
So I am like, let's say, really, I'm interested in understanding from your experience, Vishwanath, to us, what is the drastic change which you have observed when it comes to the Bangalore landscape, speaking especially in particular of water reality, whether it is the amount of water, as you rightly mentioned, right, the duration has decreased and how it is increasing, and it is also because there are various factors. Urbanization is one thing, and we also have climate change. Can you, from your experience and your learnings, can you tell us a story of how you see these changes across each, let's say, 10-year time span?
So it's not just a question of 10 years time span, Pooja. I've been studying water ever since Bangalore was formed, and water
Mm-hmm.
shortage has been a perennial problem for Bangalore. We
Oh,
are
okay.
on the top of a ridge. We are at 900 meters above sea level, some places 920 meters above sea level. We don't have a perennial river nearby. And so, therefore, we built these tanks, these human made lakes, for us to manage water. But whenever there was a year of drought or continuous years of drought, these lakes dried up. For example, in the great drought of 1876, 77, and 78, 3 years of great drought, all the 1,000 lakes of Bangalore dried up. The so-called 1,000 lakes of Bangalore dried up. The population of Bangalore was just about 1.5 lakh. And do you know 90,000 people died in Bangalore for want of water and for want of food? There was a
Oh,
famine.
I was really not knowing this number. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yeah.
about 12.5 lakh people in the old Mysore kingdom, which had 50 lakh population, 25% of the population are estimated to have died because of water shortage, right? So
Hmm.
it's never been that the lakes are in a position to fulfill the needs of a population, especially 14.5 million people or 15 million people that we are now, right? So lakes were the only form of water that we could um, get, and we used the water through wells and lakes.
Hmm.
Kere Bavi, as we call it in Kannada, this was the source of water. But we were one of the first states to start to use technology to supply water to ourselves, Bangalore. 1894, we built Hesarghatta Reservoir, and 1896, we started to use steam engines to pump water to the city to make sure that the
Hmm.
city never faced the scarcity that it did in 1876 to 78. So technology has been the marker for Bangalore's water management. From Hesarghatta, we went to Tippagodanhalli on the Kavati further down. And then finally in
Hmm.
1972, we went to the Kaveri. And we're bringing water from the Kaveri, which is really a beautiful civil engineering task. To lift water 300 meters up and to pump
Yeah.
it 95 kilometers is a phenomenal task.
Yeah,
And
and it also requires a lot of energy, right?
it does require some energy. It requires
Hmm.
energy, but then we are getting very efficient with our pumps and pipes now. And so, therefore, the energy required to bring water from the Kaveri is much less than the energy required to pump water from a borewell, for example. Right.
Oh,
So, this is something
yeah.
that technology is doing to us. So, what we need to do as Bangaloreans is we need to worry about our lakes and wetlands for sure. But we also have to remember that they will never be our sources of water. The lakes have to be preserved and protected for their
Hmm.
ecological integrity, for the biodiversity they bring, for the social, cultural, recreational relief they bring, not for
Hmm.
drinking water. Bangalore has a bigger responsibility. We need to also take care of the Kaveri. Without the
Hmm.
Kaveri River flowing freely and with good quality water, Bangalore will not exist. So we have to worry as Bangaloreans about the forest of Kodagu and the forest of Wayanad more than we worry about the lakes of Bangalore. That
Hmm.
that is the Bangalorean is now so limited to just worrying about our own lakes and wetlands
Hmm.
that we just forget that without the Kaveri we are nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something
And
that we need to remember.
yeah, and that is, I would say, for us, a brief takeaway as well, right, from this conversation, because as Bangaloreans, for us, the perennial river resource, we don't have it as of now. So the key importance is, along with this Kaveri River, like how do we manage this water is a very important point of aspect for each and every citizen staying in Bengaluru. I totally agree with that. And when we see all these changes happening, right, over the time, there is also involvement from, let's say, the communities and also the government. So how do you see the policy making part, which is being revived, or how is it being worked out from across this 100 years span for water policy in
So
Bangalore?
we've always been a bit late in catching up with the problem. But we have a very vibrant civil society organization. So
Hmm.
it was the bird watchers who flagged the fact that lakes were deteriorating. So the government responded with the Lakshman Rao Committee in the 1980s, right? And so since
Okay.
1980s, there's been a constant pressure from civil society from NGOs, from the media, and from the courts, asking the government to make sure that the lakes are protected. So overall, therefore, we now have 186 lakes in Bangalore with a reasonable form of protection. However, these lakes are still getting untreated sewage coming in, and therefore the quality of water in the lakes is very bad, right? But there's now pressure on the government to clean up its act and make sure that the sewage network is improved and the sewage treatment plants are set up to treat all the wastewater that we generate in our city. So slowly, we've made sure that all large apartments have to have their own sewage treatment plants. Yeah. So
Correct.
Bangalore now has the single largest number of sewage treatment plants for any city in the world. Yeah.
Oh.
But these apartment sewage treatment plants don't function the way we expected them to function. So therefore, there's now effort to make sure that they improve their performance, right? It's no use in having an STP, which does not
Hmm.
work well. Yeah. But we have
Yeah.
realized that there's a problem and we are trying to overcome the problem. And finally, let me make a point, Pooja. Very interesting thing that Bangalore does. Bangalore treats all its wastewater in the large sewage treatment plants of the BWSSB, 34 of them, and we
Hmm.
ship it off to Kolar and Chikballapur and Anikal, the drought-prone districts surrounding us, to make sure
Hmm.
that the lakes there are full. And these lakes recharge the aquifer and farmers have water security. When farmers have
Oh,
water
that's
security,
great.
they have livelihood security, they grow food and crops, and those crops can come back to the city and the city can get food security.
Hmm.
Right? This is the second largest project of its kind in the world, next only to that of Mexico City. Bangalore is doing that, right? Again, there's a lot of scope for improvement of treatment of wastewater, a lot of scope for making sure that local pollution in the lakes is also managed and that the water is of a sufficient quality to grow foods and to grow fish, right? But the effort is on and things are going on at the pace. So I'm really hopeful that with this three taps approach, Bangalore will be able to solve its water problem very, very soon.
Yeah, and this is, let's say, an positive outcome of the story which I am listening. Vishwanath, can you please help me understand? I was also briefly reading some of the reports where we already know Cape Town when they had this crisis and there was no water to them. I was reading a lot of articles which they were saying like Bangalore is gonna anytime reaching the same zone, and help me understand because even though I have the civil engineering background, I did not actually understand how much of it is true because there were a lot of articles running around and I did not find any literature paper actually speaking numbers. Maybe I'm not, let's say, getting the fact or resources right. Can you please help me understand when we read such articles, how do we evaluate the source? First point. And the second one is like, where do we stand with respect to that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we are subject to a lot of misinformation and misguided information, and narrative building is very easy these days in the age of social media. We got to be wary of our sources and we have to
Hmm?
understand what the true situation is. Now, here's the thing. Karnataka state has been allocated 284.75 TMC feet of water by the Supreme Court in terms of the water sharing of the Kaveri River between Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Pondicherry, right? So 284.75 TMC feet is a number that we need to remember, of which Bangalore takes 30 TMC feet. That is 11% of Karnataka's allocation of Kaveri waters, right? And supports 50% of Karnataka's population in the Kaveri basin and about 60% of the GDP of the whole area, right? That's supported by this 11% of water. We have four dams on the Kaveri upstream, four large dams. There are smaller dams also. The four dams are KRS, Kabini, Harangi, and Hemavati. Four dams. Now, all these four dams' water can, at points of emergency, be used to make sure that drinking water to Bangalore is safe and secure. So, there is not a water scarcity for Bangalore till the Kaveri goes dry. Yeah. So, we are not going to be a Cape Town unless the Kaveri goes dry. If the Kaveri goes dry, we are finished. Yeah. But even though the Kaveri has 10% of its flows, which it is most likely to have, Bangalore will survive easily.
Okay.
If we put in place uh, rainwater harvesting and treated wastewater reuse systems, we will again have plenty of water for ourselves to survive. I would guess that we could survive with a population of 30 to 40 million. We are now 15 million, right? So that's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I must say that the amount of misinformation what we have, and even with technical understanding, I'm just worrying about the fact that a person who can understand the technicalities of this is still finding such informations, and sometimes, yes, it does bother me as well. So the way the information is being interpreted, or also the kind of information which is portrayed on social media, sometimes it makes us, believe the facts whatever is being presented by certain person or source. So I was just I would like to emphasize on the fact that we go and check as far as possible the official data, the water quality or the water resources. That would be much better place for us to make a judgment out of any, let's say, information which we find online. And moving ahead with this, Vishwanath, I wanted to know, apart from Biome and Rainwater Club, your activities has been spanning across urban planning also. Could you help us, like, what is that Bengaluru is doing in terms of urban planning to manage its water resources?
Unfortunately, not much. This is one sad story with Bangalore, that we don't have a good urban plan. However,
Okay.
we have a regional plan, which is called the BMRDA plan, which is about
Mhm,
8,000 square kilometers, the Bangalore Metropolitan Regional Development Authority plan.
mhm.
That is something that we need to work on. We should not just worry about the 750 square kilometers of Greater Bangalore Authority, but we should worry about the larger 8,000 square kilometers and make sure that we do a good master plan to ensure formal plan development. If unplanned development comes into the periphery of the city, then it becomes very difficult to put roads, to provide solid waste management, to put water supply, to make
Yeah.
sewage network lines, right? So this is one weak area for Bangalore, and we need to quickly act to make sure that all of Bangalore is planned.
Yeah, and adding to that is, like, we see a lot of urban flooding, right? Whenever we have, let's say, in certain areas where you
Yes.
can see a large amount of water being stored,
Uh,
even if the rainwater fall is not too heavy comparatively, a substantial rain, it happens so common here in
yeah,
Bengaluru.
yeah.
So this is a key point for us to be addressed in urban planning.
Absolutely. So that is not actually flooding. I would call it waterlogging.
Clogging,
Flooding is an
okay.
event which would be there for many days, but waterlogging is really an issue and a challenge, especially in
Mm-hmm.
critical pockets. And this has got to do with bad road planning, bad road design, and bad stormwater design, rather than with
Mm-hmm.
anything more substantial, right? So it's a micro mistake or a micro planning mistake. These hotspots need to be identified, and we need to make sure that they are addressed from a civil engineering perspective. One hotspot, for example, are the underpasses in the road. They always get
Yeah,
flooded,
yeah, yeah,
and
correct.
and we all know that this is a weak spot. So therefore, it's very easy to concentrate there and make sure that we put in place good design, including pumping systems which are independent of electrical lines, to make sure that that flooding is not there, right? So these interventions are, I'm sure, with the new minister who's taking charge of Bangalore, uh, we will put that on the radar and we will start to take action on it very quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And also, there is this one more angle when it comes to this water, right? Now, this climate change and climate action, whenever we are trying to address it, can you help us understand what should be the center of such climate conversation when it comes to particularly with water angle? How can we
So
be proactive in this area?
So we got to be really realistic. What climate change is doing and global warming is doing is that, like I told you, it's increasing the severity of drought and cyclone. This is a year of El Nino. We don't
Hmm?
know what the impact will be, but we should be prepared for less rainfall in the Kaveri Basin, right? So Bangalore has to be
Yeah.
ready for less rainfall in the Kaveri Basin. Within the city itself, the intensity of the rainfall is now 240 millimeters an hour at points of time. And it's
Hmm?
concentrated and it falls in certain pockets only. So we need rapid response team. Let's say, for example, yesterday's rainfall was in Whitefield area, and that was the major problem, and a bit of it in Yelahanka. So only two spots in the city were impacted very much because the rainfall was that localized. So we need rapid response teams to be able to get to these places quickly, perhaps in advance with early warning systems, and make sure that the inconvenience caused by these rainfall events are minimized or eliminated. So therefore, we need to reimagine our institutional response to
Mm-hmm.
climate change.
Yeah. And with that, you have inspired thousands through your work, right, in this area. So, what's one small action every listener can take this week to become a better steward of water?
So there's not, the one small action is, for me, be mindful. Be mindful of what you consume. Be mindful of what you throw out as pollution. Be mindful of how you use water. And with mindfulness, cultivate the practice of becoming sensitive. Only if we care will we understand, and only if we understand will we solve a problem. So be mindful would be my lesson.
Yeah, and that is the key important point. Being aware of where, let's say, you're spending your time or what resources you are consuming is two important aspects. You can, wherever you are spending money, is like giving power to somebody. Let's say, what is that I'm spending my time on is a second type of resource where I'm willing to be. What type of content we consume, what type of, let's say, products are we buying, all this boils down at the end of the day to our awareness and being mindful of what is required of us and what are the really important needs which we have to address. I understand that, and I also would like everyone listening to this to please make a pledge where you only buy what is required for you, and also be mindful that where your resources are coming from. That's the only way we can address the resource crisis which is coming at us right now. And we are at the end of this, Vishwanath. So we have a small round of rapid fire where you would have like three, four questions. You just have to give one word for this.
Sure.
Yeah, cool. Then lake or well?
Well,
Well, okay. Rainwater harvesting, is it a necessity or opportunity?
opportunity.
Okay. And the most underrated climate solution?
Painting the roof white, insulating the rooftop.
Okay. Complete this sentence. Water is
Life.
life. Okay. Thank you so much. A big thank you to you for reminding us the water security isn't just a policy and isn't just a commodity which we use. It's a all in all a life resource which is required for us every today day to day life, right? So if this conversation inspired you, share it with someone who cares about sustainability, urban living, and climate resilience. And if you have such better ideas, please share with us. We would like to hear from you. So until next time, stay curious, stay conscious. Let's set to get green.